Hi. So there's been a lot of stuff going on in financial markets recently, as I'm sure you're well aware. And here's the dealio, kids. In my personal opinion, and I think in other people's as well, this is not something that's just contextual to 2025 or the current culture or the politics or even the markets. This is something that's been building for well over 30 years and something that the leading institutions and establishments of our day have been attempting to avoid seriously. 2008, 1987, these were precursors. These were the rumbles of the earthquake. We are, I believe, about to experience a serious correction, and that is light terminology. And I'd like to shed a little bit of light on what may have led up to this, what is possibly going on, some of the elements at play, and also, maybe what likely outcomes could be and what we can do about it. I'm not a financial analyst. I'm a hobbyist. I've read about, the news, obviously, and I've read a few books on, the subject. People working in Wall Street, like Michael Lewis or Andrew Ross Sorkin. So take whatever I say with a grain of salt, but if you're looking for kind of a man on the ground, live action news reporter sort of hobbyist vibe, if you're looking for someone who might be a little bit like you, who kind of knows what's going on but not really, and you just want to kind of hear what somebody else thinks who studied it just a little bit from a common perspective, you come to the right place. So without further ado, let's take a look at what the next financial apocalypse might be and how you can survive it. I don't know if you know this, but the country of Japan was technically in a recession between 1991 and 2023, and they actually re-entered that recession, debatably, in late 2023 and early 2024, although those economic figures were later revised. If you had told someone in 1985 that the Japanese would enter into a 30-year recession, they would have looked at you like you were crazy. The Japanese throughout the 1980s dominated many, many key markets, electronics, cars, real estate. They were cash rich. At one point, the Tokyo Imperial Palace, which is literally, it measures like 3,696 feet. So 0.7 miles. That 0.7 miles in Japan was worth more than the entire real estate value of California combined. They were very, very, very wealthy, and everybody was convinced, including the Americans, that if capitalism was a race, Japan had basically won, and they'd finished miles ahead of everybody else, and now all that was left to do was wait for the times to come in. And the times did come in. In 1989, something began to happen, and between 1989 and 1991, the Japanese stock market fell by, at minimum, by some estimates, 35%. That's trillions of dollars lost like that. Sound familiar? This led to what they call the lost decades, and eventually the recession that ended up lasting for 30 years. Some Western economists even said that if developed economies in the West or even in other places in the world allowed their debt to catch up to them like the Japanese had, that the Japanese recession would not only be something unique and horrible to happen to Japan, it would be the fate, the inevitable fate of all developed economies in the world if they were not able to keep ahead of their debt. Other economies from developed countries, especially the West, looked at that and they were like, oh, well, thank goodness, that'll never happen to us. The Japanese overextended themselves. They let their prices get out of control. But what prices were those in Japan? What eventually led to that collapse? Well, it was real estate. So thank goodness nobody was overvaluing real estate in the West. In 2008, 17 years after the Japanese economy collapsed and entered a prolonged recession because of toxic real estate assets, the United States economy and the global economy collapsed and entered a prolonged recession because of toxic real estate assets. I'm going to make this section pretty quick because a lot of us know, sort of what happened here. But there's one thing, one number, one figure you might not know, and that's this one. It's estimated that we lost relatively $2 trillion from the global pool of capital because of 2008. Now, $2 trillion may not sound on a wide scale like a lot of money. The Japanese economy in 1991 lost trillions of dollars. We are losing trillions of dollars in the United States and across global markets right now. But that's why this is important. We live in a financial system where everything is interconnected. If I lend you money, I'm going to expect that it's going to be paid back. And if I'm expecting that it's going to be paid back, I'm going to start making deals with a bunch of other people, expecting I'm going to have the amount of money I paid you, and they're going to make deals based on me being able to pay them back. So if you end up not being able to pay me back, I can't pay them back, and they can't pay other people back. And you can see how in a system where capital has to constantly flow, even one interruption can result in a serious cascade of complete and total loss. The reason I say you should know the figure $2 trillion as the losses from the global recession is because I personally don't believe that that is the stopping point. I believe that we lost far more. Far, far more. And the mechanics of our financial system would, I believe, lead many to the same conclusion, that if you lose $2 trillion in a system that has to constantly seek repayment, the losses from $2 trillion can exponentially grow very, very quickly. I believe that we never left the Great Recession. I think we are still in it. And I think that's why we're in our current situation right now, where companies, countries, and private individuals are scrambling to pay off their debts, because those debts only grew. When a company restructures, there are a few common occurrences: mass layoffs, the closure of departments that no longer seem to benefit the company or offer a good return on investment, and the discontinuation of products or services which no longer add to the bottom line. Normally, these actions and strategies are relegated to the private sector, but as of January 2025, it seems like they've been directed towards the public at one entity in particular: the government of the United States of America. The recent chaos in the markets aligns with these goals. By tanking global markets, not only are you damaging the assets of competitors, you're also forcing companies under your country's umbrella to sink or swim. Theoretically, this sheds dead weight and increases end-exit value. This is a private equity firm's wildest dream: managing the portfolio company of America Inc. Historically speaking, a corporate restructuring usually goes two ways. Either the company is fully restructured and streamlined and continues under new management, or it is stripped down to its key components and sold for parts to the highest bidders. This might all seem a little apocalyptic and fictional, and to a degree, it is. But there does seem to be a real question emerging, and one I believe may only grow over the next 4 years, maybe more. If the United States really is undergoing the largest corporate restructuring in the history of the modern economic model, what does that mean for you? Because keep in mind, even if you're not in the United States, if they are really restructuring the country like a company, do you think they'll just stop here? So, let's weave all of what we've talked about together. In 1991, the Japanese economy entered a 30-year recession, ushered in by the collapse of overinflated real estate assets. Economies around the world took notice and learned that the same thing, the same prolonged recession, could happen to them if they didn't stay ahead of their debts. In 2008, the debt caught up with the rest of the world, and the entire global economy collapsed because of over-reliance on overinflated American mortgage-backed securities. This Great Recession caused a $2 trillion loss in growth for the global economy, a loss which given the highly interconnected nature of the entire global financial system, may have actually been far greater, far more substantial than ever reported. And in fact, you could argue that it could have been so great that we've never left the Great Recession, that the past relative decade of booms in areas like finance and technology were not because of great industry necessarily, but were mainly fueled by highly anomalous and historical low interest rates, which allowed people to borrow money at the lowest rates that have ever been tracked. This could potentially lead one to say that the decade from 2010 to 2019, the area of historically low interest rates, was really nothing more than basically a phantom or a fantasy decade of prosperity. And that in reality, a return to recession is not only perhaps in the cards, but something that we never left in the first place. Since January of 2025, the United States government has been the subject of a wide-scale corporate restructuring unlike anything ever seen before in government or in the history of the modern economic system. Now, this may be a Hail Mary attempt to streamline the country financially and keep it ahead of its debts, or it could be something of an effort to strip it down to its bare parts and sell them off in one way or another to the highest bidder. This timeline seems to have one common thread. People, companies, and countries all trying to outrun the realities of excessive spending and debt. It starts to feel like everybody's basically snuffling around in the couch cushions for the last pennies in the world. I have to be nakedly honest, I don't think there is a way out of a recession, mainly because I don't think a recession is the worst option on the table. If you're in a situation where government officials are treating your country like a tech startup or a fire sale, if you're in a situation where people are having to take out loans to pay for meals delivered to their home or tickets to expensive event venues or even just basic groceries, I think somewhere, some way, someone along this whole arc lost the plot. We've been living in a world fueled by fraudulent excess for a long time now, and we've been pretending like it's normal. A recession in this case may not be a negative dip, it could really just be a return, a relative approximation back to a more accurate standard of baseline value, sort of like an alcoholic experiencing withdrawals. The withdrawals are a sign of the body attempting to return to a sense of normality, a standard, after years or just a prolonged period of unreality. You know, chances are that it's going to get uglier, like a lot uglier. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be bad. We don't have to dip into Mad Max over this. You know what I mean? I wish I had better words to tell you, but honestly, from the ground floor, this is what it kind of looks like. Now, if anything, this period gives us the chance to ask some pretty real questions. What can I lose in this world, and what can't I live without? What is the true measure of real value? And when I have it, how will I choose to spend it? Corny, maybe. But the entire global economy might be fairy dust. So why not try and write a fairy tale ending?